Hello, Warrior TV. Steve Knapp and Tessa Spannberg back for the latest edition of Empower You. And tonight we are going to be talking all things grief. We've heard a little whisper that it would be National Grief Awareness Week, we believe, in the UK. We haven't noticed that in Australia, but we thought a pretty powerful topic to discuss, didn't we, Tessa? It's something that every single person on the planet experiences multiple times in their life, and we all deal with it differently and have different forms of how we cope. So it should be a pretty exciting topic, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially in light of all things COVID over the last 2 years, even if you haven't lost someone close to you, we may have experienced grief and loss in different forms. And that can be loss of a job, loss of employment, loss of a business. I know with Australia, we experience bushfires, like flooding. So that's all those types of loss that causes grief as well that we don't always think about. But we'll get into all of that.
So settle in, guys. We'll give you the quick intro video and we will be back to cover off all things grief. We'll see you shortly. Damn, that's a catchy video. You can't just hear and bounce along. I love it. Caroline smashed it there. Good morning, Kerry. She's up bright and early tuning in to us.
Hey, Kerry.
Kerry's the inspiration for tonight's show. She was the one that pointed us towards Grief Awareness Week. So all kudos to Kerry for all the stuff we come up with tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. And what a great topic, I think, especially for Australia as well, because we're just coming out of restrictions in New South Wales and Victoria. And the more lockdown eases, the more we have the opportunity to do the things that we were maybe not able to do. With that, if we have experienced loss in whichever form or shape, like we spoke about earlier, because loss can be anything, loss of a loved one, loss of a pet, loss of a job, a business, like we were saying earlier, bushfires we experience. So it's loss of maybe your home, property. We're having major floods up in Queensland, Steve.
Yeah,
so people are experiencing, that's grief as well, having your property damaged or having to evacuate. And we don't always think about it in that way, because often we associate, I guess, the loss with losing someone. And it's all of that. So, yeah, so we wanted to dive in, because I think now with restrictions opening, if you have lost someone, it may trigger you, like driving past a certain place. So I actually volunteer for one of the grief services in Australia, and I've heard a few stories where people say, oh, I drive past the hospital where my mom passed, or, and it's on my way to work. So that just constantly taps into that grief or that loss. So it's quite hard, for people. Whereas being home, you're kind of isolated, you are grieving, but now you're actually getting out there and you may be experiencing, I guess, this additional triggers every time you pass by a favorite spot or a favorite restaurant.
Yeah. And I suppose one important thing to remember as well is there's no right or wrong way to grieve something. And even if you've lost loved ones and you may feel that like it's not the same experience twice, that doesn't mean that you love the other person any less. It's just wherever you're at in your life is going to definitely allow you to process and work through the emotions differently at any given time. Like you could even feel like grief can bring on guilt, and a lot of guilt, heavy guilt. Like I've almost felt guilty before when I've felt stronger, heavier grief from a loss of a pet than I have of like a close family member. But it's not that, there's nothing wrong with that. Everything's totally normal. And it's something to be very aware of, that you're never going to be processing things the exact same way twice.
And spot on, and like never processing the same way as anyone else. And I always say, when I'm coaching people, be kind to yourself, be compassionate, and don't expect the grief to end in a month or 3 months, or, you know, it's different for everyone. Everyone experiences grief so differently for different amounts of time. And so the thing really to be is kind and compassionate. And it's true, Steve, there's a lot of feelings, mixed emotions that come up with the various types of griefs as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's it, isn't there? There is so many different forms of grief. It's not just a one box, one size fits all. It covers so many different bases, which is why it's being really empathetic and being more of a listener to someone going through grief's more important than anything else. There's no value in giving opinion or even just saying baseless praises of, yeah, you'll be right, you know, this will pass soon. Like that's not going to serve anyone that's going through any form of grief. It's more just being that safe space and opening yourself to being present and listening to what someone needs to get off their chest at the time. And that's going to help alleviate them more than any opinions or anything else you can throw at them.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, you don't have to always have all the answers. Sometimes it's about just being with that person, listening. So if you're looking, because often with grief, before I didn't understand like what to say, how to deal with the person. And now I've realized that sometimes it's just about listening. If they want to talk, let them. And as you said, it's so true. People don't want to hear you say, it's okay, it's going to get better, or they just want to be in that. That's the space they're in right now. So all you can do is acknowledge them and say, I get it, I'm here for you. Take as much time as you need, you know, with this grief. And I may not, you can even say, I may not understand what exactly you're going through, but I'm here for you. So if you feel you need to talk, you know, create that safe space. Because sometimes, like you were saying, the feelings that come, people feel so guilty or they feel so angry. And then they don't know how to express that. And then they have this pressure because they teary or they crying, because we show our worry, because we worry, we then become worried about them. Then they feel guilty because they're reacting in that way, and they feel like, oh, this should be over by now. You know, no, it takes however long it's going to take. The only things, and we'll get into that a little bit later, is there are different types of grief and what we're going to need to watch out for. Like there's complicated grief and then there's chronic grief. But unless it's those two, people grieve differently. And sometimes it's in like, I call it like a life cycle, or like you'll be grieving and then you'll be fine for a while, and then something will happen that, you know, comes up, and then you'll feel that ache and that pain again. And it's like, it's, you know, it's okay, and it's normal. And
it is.
Yeah.
So
and even really, yeah.
Sorry, Dale.
No, I was saying, even with relationships, I mean, you can grieve the loss of a relationship if you were very, because you, like with relationships, we invest so much time into it. There's effort, there's love, there's so much emotions that go into it, no matter how the relationship ended or what actually happened in the relationship. People also think, oh, but he treated you bad, get over it. Why are you grieving? Why are you feeling like this? But it's a loss at the end of the day, no matter what, because you've invested time and energy. And if you have kids, it's another ball game. So be kind. You know, it's going to take time, and it can take as long as you need it to be, as long as you're moving forward and doing resourceful actions or resourceful things. I think that's really important.
Yeah, definitely. Like we always tap into, going to the resourceful state's going to help you through many things, and grief's just another one to tick off in that box. But just a quick jump into the comments. We've had a quick hello from Liz in Canada. She said she's going to catch us on the replay. She just dropped in quickly. Adam said g'day. Mum's jumped on.
Hey.
It's all coming. Oh, Caroline's just jumped in. The great Charles Maddox has said hello and watching in. And we've had Adam said losing Philip Chan hit him harder than it hit him when he lost his own uncle, and that's not him being selfish. And totally true. It's not selfish at all. It's just at any given moment, the grief is going to hit you in different ways. And I think one of the most important things when you are grieving something is to not make the effort to suppress any particular emotions. If you try to block out any of the sadness or the guilt or the anger or frustration, it's going to come back and fester inside and make the process of working through it so much harder. It's a matter of not letting an emotion take over you, but allowing them to be there and present and understanding what's going on. I think that's a real important awareness to have around grief and emotions as well.
Yeah, and it's so true. I think with different people, it depends on the relationship you had, the closeness, or I guess the things that you enjoyed doing together. So you are going to grieve totally differently for everyone. And it doesn't mean you love them any less. You know, you love them differently, or you appreciate them in a different way. And the impact of losing someone that you were more in contact with, or, you know, supported you maybe more, is going to be possibly harder on you than someone that's a distant relative, or that, you know, you're not as close to. And I think through all of this, it's to remember not to get in that guilty space, not to get in that I should be grieving this way, because you grieve the way you grieve is not something that you intend or something that you you choose. You know, it's not a choice. It just happens. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's another big reason why a lot of the time we'll grieve a pet more greatly than we'll grieve a family member, because they're in your life every minute you're at home and you're around them, that they become a piece of you. So it's, whereas you can go, oh, you know, I should really have like grieved my grandparents' loss much more than my dog, but it's, you don't have control. You don't get to choose how you're going to go. Different people, animal, everything comes in at all different times and can give you a totally different perspective on how you're going to cope, what your mechanisms will be. Like, you can use totally different mechanisms to work through grief depending on the person, the animal, the job, the business, the marriage. There's a different tool for the toolbox to go through every single part of it and every facet. And yeah, Caroline's just said it. It's natural. And you can't make it any other way. You can't, like, you can try. Like, we've all medicated through grief in forms that probably haven't benefited. Like, obviously alcohol is a big one when you're grieving.
Yeah.
And generally doesn't, it might feel good in the moment, but generally doesn't help the grief dissipate any quicker. It will probably make it linger a bit longer as it can tie back into depression and things like that. And just want to touch on Martine Jeanette, another Canadian here as well, doing great job tagging everyone and saying, you can choose to dive deep into your emotions, which you certainly can. The way you handle this is going to be a choice at times. As much as your emotions are going to take over a bit, you are going to choose how to process them and what you're going to do to let them come through in waves and allow them to serve you in a purpose that's going to give you a greater understanding of the person.
Yeah, and I'm just looking at Kerry just said, losing my mama hit me hardest and made me into the warrior queen. Yeah, and losing someone like that is hard, and there's lots of little things that, you know, you'd go to the person for maybe, you know, and then when they're not there, so you'd be fine for days on end, and then you think, oh, I need advice on this. And that's what happened to me this year. I lost 3 family members. And it was okay. The one was, my aunt was old, so she was not well. The other 2 were quite sudden. And it's hard because my youngest aunt was the person I'd go to and chat to about anything, about my daughter, about this, about that. And so when I have a question to ask, it's like she's not there. And I was fine for months, and then it's like it just hits you, you know? And that's okay. And, you know, me, I cry, I let the emotions out, and then I'm okay again. But I don't judge. I miss her, and I know that's the process, and it's going to be okay. I heard a podcast where 2 young, and it's a great podcast. If anyone is going through grief, it's called Good Morning, and it's done by 2 young, beautiful ladies. They lost their parents, I think. Yeah, a mom each. And they talk about the grief doesn't shrink. Like, we all always think it gets better with time. And their kind of explanation was, doesn't really get smaller. It actually, your life becomes bigger. So you're doing more. Whereas when you're in that grief space, it's kind of like a tight ball, and it's all about the grief at that space or at that time. And then as more time is passing, you're doing more things, you're not feeling as guilty, because often there's a lot of guilt that goes with grieving. Like, we feel like we shouldn't be doing certain things. We feel like, you often hear survivor's guilt as well. People who survive an accident and someone else has passed, you know, maybe in that same collision or whatever happened. There's the survive. Why did I survive? Why was, you know, I the only one that survived? So they were actually explaining that the grief, your life just becomes bigger. So you letting more in. Whereas I think when you're in that grieving space, you're kind of closed off sometimes. And those are things we also need to watch for when we're in this grief space. How are we? What's changing? How's the sleeping patterns? What's their appetite like? If the feelings of despair are so severe, then we have to like reach out and actually contact someone, because we can be going into more chronic or complicated grief. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And Adam's asked, he's got a question for both of us. There are people out there who've lost someone close to them on birthdays or even Christmas Day. How do you cope with grief then?
That is like over this period, we find we get so many calls because people, it's just because this is a festive time, or a birthday is a festive, a happy time. You just feel so sad. We normally tell people to take it one day at a time and do what they feel like doing. Don't pressurize yourself, or don't feel pressured by anyone. If you don't want to be jolly, you don't want to go and celebrate, have something small at home, or do, basically the point is you do what makes you feel good without any pressure, without feeling the need to please others, and then you just feel miserable. Or because it's a sad time. Birthdays are triggering. It's anniversaries. Even years later, you'll still be thinking, anniversary coming up, or birthday coming up, or Christmas. We used to do this together. It's hard. It's really hard. So I'd say just be kind to yourself and do what's right for you.
Yeah, perfectly said, Tessa. And for me, just to throw a bit of a sideways swerve at it, Christmas and that can be difficult, but the time of someone's passing or anything is pretty much, in my opinion, it's pretty well irrelevant, because no matter what part of the year it is, that you're going to have memories attached. Like, how often do you hear like, oh, do you remember where you were when Kobe Bryant's helicopter crashed? Do you remember when like Richie Valent's plane crashed? Like, whatever time of the year it is, if you've lost someone or something profound's happened, you're going to get the same emotions dredged up, whether it's a time like, no matter what, it's going to be a time when other people are happy and thinking it's the best day of their life, when you're going, I can't cope today. This is a horrible day. So for me, like, Christmas times and things, they're going to bring up their own special little problems for you, but that will be around the grief side of things for any given day out of the 365. I put a lot more credence in the actual relationship rather than the time. Just from my little slant on it.
Yeah, it's so true. And like you're saying, like you can have a moment anytime, something can remind you, and you can have that, have a moment and grieve or feel sad. And that's okay. And that's okay. As long as you're taking the steps to look after yourself, look after your, so we always try and encourage people. There's a nice little toolkit. We call it the East toolkit. And we find out, are you eating properly? Are you being active? Because often that's such a great thing. Go for a walk around the block. Often people who are really grieving or in the depths of despair, if they just do something physical, it really, really helps. And then the S is for sleep. And the T is for time. Like, it's going to take time. And be kind to yourself. Don't expect it to just, it needs to be over in 3 months. You need to feel better. Because often I think the pressure also comes from the outside, from family or friends, because they feel hurt seeing you in this space of being teary or being sad. And so it's that you're worried about them, but you're grieving. And so it becomes this really complicated thing. And all I can say to people is, if you want to, how you support those people grieving is listen to them, create a safe space, just acknowledge that they're going through this. And It is what it is. You know, you can't force a change.
No, and I think you touched on a bit there too with the external side of things. It's hard because every single person you interact with is going to have a different expectation for how you should be grieving.
Yeah.
They're going to think of how they're going to put themselves into your shoes and think how they would be feeling. And that can bring a whole other bout of pressure onto your shoulders because you're like, oh, well, I've had a really good day, but they said I should be feeling awful. Or I feel awful, but they said I should be over it. So like everyone's going to have, if you listen to too much external noise, you're going to be getting a lot of feedback that is probably going to go against the grain of how you're actually feeling internally and probably causing more damage than like we said at the start. If people can just be present and listen and not give opinions, it's going to make a huge difference to being able to block out other people's external noise and let you cope with the mechanisms that you need to get through.
Yeah, spot on. Like I've had a mom call in and she was pretty sad and she was like, you know, I don't want, it's coming up for the anniversary and it's Christmas. I don't feel like doing any of that, but people expect me to. And today I was feeling sad because obviously it's nearing the anniversary and my son wanted me to call you guys, you know? And so it's like, she's in the space that she's in, but it's the external that's worried. And also you can't, I guess, sometimes you need to be aware of what's happening with a person grieving, right? But like you just said, Steve, they in their space. So as long as they're not wanting to harm themselves or be, I guess, like, you know, do something to themselves because they're in their state of grief. It's important to give people space.
Oh, big time.
It's important to give people space.
It's crucial.
Yeah. And so
it's very interesting.
Yeah.
Sorry.
You were saying? No, you were saying? Oh, okay.
I was just saying, when you touch the I think I'm getting a delay from you. You're not coming through all the time.
Oh. Better? Okay, you go.
Just now and then. It's my usual StreamYard techniques.
Go, Steve.
Yeah, I was just saying, when you were saying with the East technique, how that just aligns exactly in the depression zone, doesn't it? Eating, activity, sleep, like the parallels between grief and depression are amazing, and how similar the feelings are that come up with the two. They're so parallel, it's insane.
Spot on. And that leads us into, there's also different types of griefs. So there's about 10 of them that I have, and I brought my notes with me because I just thought it would be nice to just, you know, go through them, because it's so important for people to also understand. Like the first one, they call it normal grief, but it's not normal in that sense. It's just that sometimes you find people, they process their grief in the way where they carry on with their daily activities, and to the outside world is like, are they not grieving? But they, you know, they are, but they just able to keep going. And they are also the ones, unless you're really, really close to them, you may not know, you may be thinking. And that's why I think it's so important not to judge people as well in this space, because you don't know what's going on with them. They may look like they've jumped right back into their routine, nothing's changed. It's only the people that are really, really close to them that will know that they are grieving, you know? And so the grief can be so unpredictable for them as well. And they may not look like they're grieving or crying all over the place. And that's just one form of grief, or how people react to grief. Then there's something called anticipatory grief, which I feel is so hard. It's like when people are like they've got an illness or a terminal illness, and you're kind of waiting. You know, this person's going to go, so you don't know, should you be grieving? You are grieving. Do you show them? Like, how do you talk to people? Because that person is still alive, so you don't like have that support. And so with that, I think it's so important to reach out as well and speak to someone, because you know that you're kind of preparing yourself for this person to go. So when it actually happens, it may not be so much of a shock or a sadness or a loss or a grief. But then what also comes with that is all the feelings of guilt, because you actually were anticipating this. So there's different types of grief. It's so interesting, and so important for us to maybe just be a little bit more open, be aware, because we don't know what people are experiencing. We don't know what they're going through. And when they react in that way. Yeah.
And I even feel like when you were touching on normal grief, I feel like, I mean, we haven't gone through them all yet, but I feel like that's where I sit most of the times in grief. And it's very similar to when I was depressed. You probably wouldn't know that I'm grieving, and then that also brings in guilt as well, because I feel a lot of the time grief is one thing that I tend to be able to move through quite quickly.
Yeah.
I don't like I get it all out. I really think long and hard about it, and but then I seem to be moving forward very quickly, and that brings up a lot of guilt. You're like, this should feel a lot worse. You're not meant to get over this quickly, and it's not. And it could easily come across to someone that doesn't know me well as I see, didn't really care that much. He's over it, like we haven't seen him cry once, like, and it's so you can definitely get caught up in a bit of shame and guilt depending on what way you sort of flow through. But I think one thing which I think our Rainbow Warrior is going to like this, because I noticed what her last show of the year is going to be about, and if there's any slots open, I definitely want in. I think gratitude is a super awesome thing to really, really harness when grieving. And I think that's what's helped me move through a lot of things pretty rapidly, is just an immense amount of gratitude for the time I got to spend with the person, the experiences, what they taught me, like the whole relationship and everything about it, for no matter how long a period of time it is. Like, you don't have to grieve anymore for a grandparent that you've known your whole life as you do for someone. You can get super close with someone in 6 months and grieve them just as much. And so I found having a deep sense of gratitude around having the privilege to have known that person for as long as you did, as that, I think that's something that definitely stabilizes my grief and helps me probably get through things quite rapidly, as opposed to where a few other people would maybe sort of be in a holding pattern a bit longer.
Absolutely. It's so true. It's the way you process it. And as Caroline just said, it is, you can't go around it. You have to go through it. And it's a daily thing. Like, you can try to suppress those emotions, but you're going to have to feel it. They're going to come up. And so you have to go through it. And it's transformational. And the transformation that you make can either be uplifting in the way that you did. You looked at it from a point of like, I got so much value from this person. I'm so glad that person was in my life, to I just can't live without the person. Like there's no acceptance. And that is so hard. And often when there's that kind of grief, it can go into what they call complicated grief, because people just they just continue grieving. There's despair, there's frustration, there's anger, there's even like avoidance, and the grief just goes on and on and on. And for grief like that, you've got to reach out and talk to someone, because often there are feelings of like, I want to go to sometimes to the same place, and there's self-harm or suicidal thoughts or ideations, and so that's something that's, and sometimes people just don't know how to get out of it, like the loss was maybe very unexpected, or this was there, like like I do this volunteering, and as sad as it is, it also gives me like I hear wonderful stories, like people married for 62 years, or been together for 62 years, and how they miss each other, and I think like in my heart, like, wow, that love is so powerful, and so like I say, you've been together so long, don't expect to get over it like this, and often people don't. They like, yeah, you're right, like there's all this emotions, there's this feeling, there's this life that was lived. You can't be expected to get over it in a year, or even, it's gonna take time. And then people have, sometimes they have chronic grief as well, where it's just also extended, but it gets worse and worse and worse over time. And they say there's really feelings of hopelessness with chronic grief. So people need to just pay attention and look out for that, because there's no progress, there's no acceptance. So they don't move towards that, where we all kind of go through the stages of grief, and grief is not linear. It's not, this is going to happen, then this and this. It goes up, down, it goes all over the place. And and we process it differently. And sometimes there's more emotions, there's anger, and there's sadness at the same time. You're so angry that this happened, but you're so sad, So it's not linear. So that's another, we used to hear of the 5 stages of grief and all of that. They've moved away from that, because people don't grieve in that way. It's not linear. It's not, you're going to go to anger, then acceptance, then this. No. People grieve mixture of emotions, because we're all so different.
I'm glad they've gone away from that, because when you put things like that in place, you are saying that every single person grieves in the same way. Like, yeah, every single person that's lost someone, you're going to go from here to there, to there, to there, to there, and then it's gone. Yay. Woohoo.
Yeah.
What a crock. Like, that is so not realistic.
And I think the lady that came up with that was really working with like terminal people. So it was like really, there was a pattern, but everyone kind of took it on as though we're all grieving like that, but it's not. It's all over the place, and it's not linear. Some days are worse than others. And also like, disenfranchised grief. That's another one. And maybe Adam, I'm not sure, I need to just check, but maybe that's what you're experiencing with, because Adam said for 5 years I chose not to look forward to Christmas because my daughter isn't here. But this is the first time I put myself into the spirit of Christmas. And it's not easy to do, because sometimes when we disenfranchised, we, like our loss is not like people think, or it's made to be not as big of a loss for anyone. Or people have feelings about something, and then they feel like that loss is not as important. So that's also a difficult grief to overcome, because the person is, they experiencing grief. You can't tell someone how to grieve or what to grieve about, or that their grief is, or their loss is not as important as yours.
Yeah.
And that's what they call disenfranchised grief. So people will feel isolated, they'll feel hopeless, they'll feel really misunderstood, because they're like, why is your grief more important than mine, I guess?
Yeah.
And so just examples of that are like the loss of a pet, which is what you spoke about. The loss of a pet is a big loss, as you were saying, because people build their lives around their pets, their routines around their pets. We are going to go for a walk at this time, you're going to wake me up at this time. And yeah, so that also falls under what they call disenfranchised grief. There's another one called absent grief. So watch out for this. They say it's when the bereaved person pretends like the grief hasn't happened. So I guess there's denial and avoidance, because maybe the shock is really too big. I sometimes hear that when people they so focus on now the next steps of the grief, like the funeral and the this and the this, and then they have to settle the house. And so they've disconnected themselves from that grief. But look out for that, because it will hit that person at some point. And and it's, it may be hard, and they may be, or even like it's delayed, the grief is delayed because you've got so much to do, there's so much going on. And often people say, like right when the loss happened, and the loss in any shape or form, like losing your house, losing a business, maybe you have so much support around you at that time, you're so busy with the people, and then the people go home, and then you kind of left to deal with this on your own.
Yeah, and that's the real difficult part, isn't it? Like, it's like so many things, while your mind's occupied and busy, you're not necessarily sitting there deep in thought. You're able to sort of put things to one side because you're not having to focus solely on that one aspect. Whereas once everybody leaves and you're there alone in your thoughts, that's when the waves of grief can really come over the top pretty severely.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just reading what Caroline has just said. It's like Caroline and I are going through similar experiences. I mean, Steve knows this. I haven't really, I guess, told anyone on the Mental Health Warriors. I don't think I mentioned it, but my dad is also, he's got prostate cancer. We discovered that this year. We don't know the stage, so we are waiting. He's gone through chemo and he's done really, really well. Like, so I don't know if I'm in anticipatory grief or not. Like, I try not to think about it, and I'm doing all the positive vibes and positive vibrations to him. But yeah, Caroline, so I hear you that Karen says, I'm dealing with that too. My mom has stage 4 cancer, so grieving for her too, as well, as we don't have long more with her. Yeah, I hear you. I'm sorry to hear that, Caroline. It's hard. It's hard, and I can completely identify. And like Steve was talking about earlier, I look for the rainbows. I look for the good times. I remember that. And I do that with my dad. We were blessed to have my dad and mom here for 8 months. They weren't planning on staying that long. They got stuck here with COVID. Yeah. And I think that it was just a blessing in disguise because we didn't know what was happening with him. So they were here, and we couldn't take them many places, but we got to really spend quality time. And so that's the thing that I keep thinking about, you know, whoever you believe in. Like for me, I guess God had a plan, and he was giving me an opportunity to spend time with them because they don't live in Australia. So yeah, it's just the way you look at it and how you deal with it. And as long as what I want to say to people, I guess, is that don't get caught in, it's easy to say, but you can get caught in those waves of sadness, negativity, and when they happen, let them go. But think about all the people around you as well who need you and want to have you around. And I always think about what would that person say? Would they want you to be that sad for them or that down, or like, would they want you to be with them? They wouldn't. They want you to live your life and understand that grieving is a process, and it's okay to go through all the emotions and the feelings and just take it a day at a time. Yeah.
When I'm gone, no one's allowed to grieve. It's party time.
We're going to have a big party for you. We're going to have a big party for you.
That's what I want. Yeah. That's definitely what I want. No need to worry. I'll be kicking back somewhere else watching on. It's all good. There's one thing I wanted to know, Tessa, whether this exists or not. I don't know. I was just thinking with what Caroline said there and how tough it would be. How do you go with, say, overlapping grief? Because obviously Caroline like now has this horrible part of the anticipatory part. But then it was only May that she lost her father. So how do you cope when you're having overlapping different versions of grief that could be conflicting, or one might be wanting to control? Like, I've put you on the spot there. It's just something that came to me when we were talking about it. I'm like, that's
no, it's all good. It's really, really difficult, and it's called cumulative grief, because it's like you almost don't have a chance to grieve the one person, and then you experience another loss, and or you experiencing another grief process, and like, yeah. So that's what I went through. Like the within a week's space of time, my uncle passed, then my aunt, and then like a month later or 3 weeks later, my youngest aunt passed as well. It was like blow after blow after blow, and like you don't have time to process all the grief, and it's like you just for me anyway, I kind of, when I remember something about them, it makes me sad, I cry, and then I think about something good that we did together, or something. I feel my emotions, and lucky I have this space at home. Like, my husband's so good, he'll like say, what's going on? And then I'll say, this reminds me of this. And like the other day, and like I didn't want to hear this. And this is another thing, I guess. about the advice that you were talking about earlier, Steve, where you were saying, like, almost don't dismiss it. And so when I was saying, I felt sad because my daughter, there was something I wanted to talk to my aunt about, and obviously she's not there, and we always discussed everything. And it made me so sad in that moment. And I was tearing and I was crying. And my husband, he completely got it because he knew how close that we were. And he said to me, like, you know, maybe you need to find someone else, because otherwise you're always going to have like that hole. And I know where he was coming from, but I didn't want to hear that. Do you know what I'm saying? I wasn't ready to hear that kind of thing. And I understand where he was coming from. And that's what we're saying. People have the best intentions, but it's like, when we're ready, we'll find that person to talk to, that other person. But when we're not, we don't want you to say that person can be replaced. Almost, you know, that's what I was thinking in my head. I didn't say that because I kind of understand like where he was also coming from. And he's right, because I am going to have to find that person, because I want to share and say, I have a tween, this is what's happening, what do you think, you know? So I need to have that person, but I'm not ready to do that now, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So
and you can't just go and pick someone. You can't just say, you're my new person. Whatever is with you are, it's now you. You're copying it all. It's like that person, that relationship was going to evolve out of somewhere else. You can't force something like that, can you? It's just going to come when it's meant to.
Exactly. So so I guess the point of tonight was really to give, if people didn't know how to support those who were grieving, use the tips, listen with compassion, just acknowledge, keep an open mind about what they're going through. And often you don't have to say anything, you know. Create that safe space and understand that it's going to take time. We all grieve differently. And then use the EASE toolkit. It's such a great acronym to remember. Remember to eat properly, even if you don't feel like it. Go for that walk around the block or the jog or whatever, dance, whatever, you know, activities you can do. It really takes your mind off the grief. Make sure you sleep well, or even if you just go and lie down, I guess. And then the time, understand it's going to take time. And the other great tools that they always talk to you about grief is like, because sometimes people try to sleep, but they don't, or they can't. So listening to that, maybe meditation or that mindfulness, is also really great. And so you can do those things. There's lots of apps that help with sleeping, or if you don't want to eat, maybe have a protein shake, you know, have some drink, like something, a smoothie, because often people don't feel like they want to eat. But even if it's just a protein shake, a smoothie, it helps.
So true. And I like, we're nearing the end, but I saw Adam's put the question, do you think when somebody sadly passes away, you will notice and recognize who your support network is during this process? And I'd start off with yes, but then I'd also follow in with not always, because as Sandy's just put in there, great to see you, Sandy, supporting someone grieving is the most difficult process for me. And that's why if somebody seems to have backed away when you're grieving, that doesn't mean they don't care. Just the same way that grief's going to affect us all differently, how people cope with supporting someone grieving, we're all different on that front as well. Like, I'm very, very good in a face-to-face situation with someone that's grieving, but I am awful if somebody puts on Facebook, my dad died, because it's not my element to get in there with a comment. It doesn't sit well with me. It doesn't align with my values. Like, as nice as it is, and I'd like to say, I'm sorry for your loss, to me on a Facebook post, that feels baseless and doesn't have my heartfelt emotion, which I would give them if they were standing in front of me. So you could look at that and go, oh, look, all my friends commented and said this. Steve just ignored it. What an ass. But that's not where I'm coming from. It's just not being able to portray it. I'd rather wait till I saw the person and then let them know how I really feel and support, rather than. So it's not. I think your support network, you should know pretty profoundly no matter what. But I think they will galvanize around you in different ways when you are going through a grieving process, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. So true, so true. And people like, it's hard, Sandy, you're absolutely spot on. People don't know what to say. They feel they need to say something, but they don't know what. And that's why we're saying you don't always have to say something. Just say, I'm sorry for your loss. I really don't know what to say. That's actually enough, because then the person will open up. Like, like I had people, like for me, like it was okay with my aunt and my uncle. We weren't as close. We were close, but not as close. But my one aunt, I didn't want to talk about. I just, like, for a while, and I just said that. I said that. And my sister-in-law was really good. It was like probably a week or two later, and she called and she said, I'm calling you to see how you're doing. And I know you don't want to talk about this, but I wanted to say, I'm here for you. And if you want to talk, we're here for you, right? And she said, like, and I miss her too. And that opened up the conversation for me. Like, then I started talking to her about it. It was just something about the way she said it allowed me to have that conversation about my aunt with her. And I didn't feel as sad or as, like, I guess, as emotional. And so sometimes it's just that. It's just like telling the person, you know what, I feel so bad because I don't know what to say. Is there anything you want me to do? Know that I'm here. And also sometimes people don't know. It's like, is it okay if I call you once a week to check in? Because often sometimes the grieving person is like, this person doesn't care about me. They're not checking in, like you're going through so much when you're grieving. So it's like, it's not rational at that time. And so sometimes you feel like no one cares. Sometimes you think, like there's just a lot going on. And I just want to say to people supporting others, don't take it personally. Don't take the reactions that you get personally. Yeah, because sometimes people need support, and sometimes maybe they don't want it at that point, or they're okay with you just being there. And so Sandy, just like, and Sandy, you're right. You can't take their pain away. And as long as you're just there and just say, is there anything I can do? I don't want to bug you, but is it okay if I check in with you once a week or every couple of days? And they'll then engage, and they'll start feeling more relaxed to start saying little things and starting the conversation. Because often we say we don't want to talk, but sometimes we do want to talk. We just don't know how to start when you're grieving, because it's a lot. There's shock, there's sadness, there's so much emotion. So so I think, you don't know what to say, I don't know what to say, but I'm here for you.
Yeah, that's all you need to. I'm here for you. That's most of the time, that's enough. And if people want to open up to you there and they feel the time's right, they're going to.
Yeah.
I think that's a nice note to end on. And
Absolutely.
Let's just give people a rundown of what else have we got coming up, Tessa. We've got Dale will be back.
Dale,
He's straight, sane, and sober with Dr. Bill Pettit. That'll be 8 p.m. UK, 7 a.m. Australia. Then what else have we got coming up? I'll be back tomorrow. I've got the superstar from New Zealand who's actually English, Anton. Anton will be on with me. And for all of the people that I know, no one on Warrior TV can get enough of Tessa. I heard a whisper that Tessa might be on with Caroline Friday night.
Yes.
Is that or Saturday morning? Is that true?
Yes.
Woo! Be
Very
tuning in for that
excited. We're
one.
going to have a really nice girls chat, a girls show. It's going to be so much fun. Yeah.
Oh, perfect. Right up my alley.
So early in the morning, I'm like, I'm going to be half asleep. No. Yeah.
Well, that was awesome, Tessa. You bring so much value as always. Everyone that's been tuning in and so many awesome comments, absolutely loved it. You guys are amazing as always. Anyone watching on the replay, we love you as well. So I think that's it for another week, guys. Only one more Empower You for 2021 to go. We will be back next week. So
and thank you, Steve. It's always a good show. Having a show with you.
I love it, Tessa.
Yeah. And thanks to everyone who jumped on tonight.
And we're very privileged to have such an awesome audience. And Tessa, you may not have seen this one yet. We have a sign-off video now that we will finish with.
No, I haven't.
So this is a little preview for Tessa and myself. I haven't seen it yet either. So thanks very much, everyone. We're going to put this little video on at the end, and we will see you all shortly. Bye.
Awesome. Bye.
Bye, guys.